Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel where we talk about real crimes and real people. We have cases that will make you angry and also cases that will make you cry. Please do subscribe and all the other things YouTube asks you to do to support content creators. So, for today, I bring you the murder of Sophie Lancaster. Sophie was attacked, she was beat up trying to protect her unconscious boyfriend because their attackers didn't like their appearance. They were different. Let's find out what happened. Let's get started. Sophie Lancaster was born on November 26, 1986 in Lancashire, England. Sophie was a student at Ashton High School, and after her gap year, she planned to do an English degree. Sophie was described as creative, artistic, funny, kind, loving, and brave. According to her mother, Sophie had been a subject of abuse because of how she dressed. Sophie, at the time of her death, had a boyfriend named Robert Maltby. Robert was 21 years old, he was from Manchester, and he was an art student. Sophie and Robert had been dating for 3 years, and both of them were linked to the goth community, which had caused them problems because they stood out, even though they were sensitive and intelligent. Being harassed wasn't unusual to Robert and Sophie, but on the early morning of August 11, 2007, everything changed for the worse. While the couple were returning home, they were followed by a group of teenagers at the skate park area of Stubby Park. They taunted Sophie and Robert, then they assaulted Robert first. Robert became unconscious and Sophie tried to protect him, and while she protected Robert, Sophie was ran over, she was kicked in the head over and over. They jumped up and down on her head. It was brutal, it was vicious, and it was deadly. Someone who witnessed the attack called the police, saying a group had attacked two goths because they were goth. When help arrived, because of the severity of the attack and the injuries both Sophie and Robert sustained, they couldn't tell who was female or male because their faces were so swollen. Sophie and Robert were hospitalized. Robert was in a coma with an internal bleeding, but he was able to recover slowly. However, he had lost his memory of the time leading up to and during the attack. But Sophie got it worse. Sophie was in a deep coma and placed on life support. Sophie was moved to other hospitals. At Hope Hospital in Salford, medical staff told Sophie's family she would never regain consciousness. And 13 days after the brutal attack, and because of the severity of her injuries, Sophie's family was advised to terminate life support. Sophie Lancaster was dead on August 24, 2007. While investigations were underway, it became known that the attackers actually celebrated what they had done and told their friends that they had done something good to two goths, or as they called them, two moshers. They had messed them up completely. It seemed a lot of people were there during the attack. Some witnessed it, others participated. However, only 5 boys, ages between 15 and 17, were arrested and charged with grievous bodily harm. One 15-year-old and one 16-year-old were remanded in custody. 2 15-year-old and one 17-year-old were out on bail, and all of their names, because of their age, were kept sealed. But things changed with the death of Sophie Lancaster. When Sophie died, those 5 boys were charged with murder. On October 31, 2007, on a preliminary hearing, they were charged with bodily harm on Robert, and they were also charged of murder on Sophie. And they all pled not guilty. But in March 2008, at the beginning of the trial, Ryan Herbert pled guilty of murder. Brendan Harris pled not guilty. The other 3 boys' murder charge was dropped. During the trial, the jury heard details of the attack from witnesses and also heard a recorded conversation. On March 27, 2008, Brendan Harris was found guilty of murder, and the judge allowed his name and Ryan's to become public. It was stated the group had actually enjoyed the attack on Robert and Sophie. They had no remorse. There was also some criticism regarding the parents. Apparently, when Brandon was interviewed initially, he was laughing and joking with his mother. On April 28, 2008, Brandon and Ryan were sentenced to life in prison. Brandon would have to serve at least 18 years and Ryan 16 and 3 months. Joseph and Danny Hume were sentenced to 5 years and 10 months. Danny Mallet was sentenced to 4 years and 4 months. The judge, in his statement, made a powerful remark. He said, "Your behavior on that night degrades humanity itself." And it sure did, as the motive for the attack was intolerance. Robert and Sophie were different. The way they dressed triggered the attack. The attackers appealed. Ryan had his minimum reduced to 15 years and 6 months, and Brandon had his minimum reduced to 14 years and 6 months. This case raised a lot of questions on whether the attack on Sophie and Robert should have been considered a hate crime. What do you think? Does attacking and killing someone because of their appearance constitute as a hate crime? Did hate move those bad kids? It also was brought into discussion and came into light on how the goth community had been subject of verbal abuse every day. On April 2013, the Great Manchester Police announced they would record offenses against goths and other alternate groups as hate crimes. Sophie's mother started a foundation which promotes tolerance and acceptance. In 2017, Robert was fully recovered from his brain injuries. He resumed his art studies. He struggled with depression. He no longer followed goth fashion, and he was in a new relationship. He planned to move abroad to follow his artistic ambitions. He stated he didn't want to be remembered by his association with the murder of Sophie. He would rather be remembered by his art. Robert also stated he didn't see Sophie's death as a hate crime, but more of a social issue. But my question is, aren't hate crimes a social issue too?